talking a little bit more about organics. We've had a couple of sessions so far. What we've got today, at this point though, is we're bringing in the organic masters. We're bringing in people, they're a bunch of experienced organic growers, 4 people that have a lot of great experience, and me. We're going to talk a lot about like how this actually really works from a production perspective. What are the secrets? How have we made it successful on our farms? What are techniques? And we really want to get after a lot of the questions that you guys have, but we're going to start off with a few of the common ones we get and talk about what it takes to be really successful growing organics at a large scale and doing it in a way that's like true professional farming. We talk a lot about the cause-oriented farmers, that maybe aren't used to growing crops at a large scale, at a high productivity level. We all know some of those folks, but what we're focused on here is talking about how do we do this in a way that we can be proud of, in ways that we have neighbors drive by our fields and say, wow, I'm glad he put that sign up because I didn't realize it was organic. We'll just go through and do quick introductions on everybody, what your experience is with organics and your acreage and kind of where you're at. JP Ray, been doing organics about 10 years in eastern Nebraska, just north of here. 5th generation, doing about 10,000 acres total. We're about 7,000 organic this year.
I'm Amy Brooke. I grew up on a farm in east central Nebraska. I was my father's son, basically. He had 2 daughters. Went away to school, got an ag engineering degree, managed and consulted with my husband on projects, both domestically and internationally. Returned home to the family farm because my father unfortunately passed away, and I leveraged organic production to really keep the family farms going in my area in east central Nebraska. We're right now a short 1,000 acres of either organic or transition, and we're trying to keep increasing that number.
I'm Jack Fair, a little town in northwest Iowa, and farm with my dad and my brothers. We're around 8,000 acres and organic and transitioning as we pick it up. And my family's been doing it for 20 plus years. It's all I've ever known. So,
I'm Noah Wendt. Our farm is A&W Farms. My partner is Caleb Aiken. We've been farming for 12 years, started on our own. We've been in organics for 3 years now. We had our first certified crop that we harvested this year. We continue to transition more and more ground each year. We have about 800 acres for 19, and we still do some commercial farming, but our goal is to probably do very minimal commercial farming.
I'm Eric Thalkin. I was kind of a punk rock western Nebraska kid, challenging a lot of different concepts, I guess, that my family had. Did a lot of vegetable production, organic dairy, even biodynamic dairy, just kind of to rub it into the family. I guess I was just that kind of kid. Right now, I found myself coming back to, somehow I manage a fairly large-scale organic farm here in Dorchester, Nebraska. So hope dig into that a little deeper if we want to later.
Yeah, Eric actually was kind of one of the first people that really helped us out on our journey to organics. In a previous life, he was
definitely
pretty instructive in helping us figure this out. At least he told us some things that we thought we could actually do.
I was impressed by your presentation today. It was, I don't want to say I didn't teach you well, but I did the same things that I've been thinking, for a long time. I heard you saying, so.
Yeah,
awesome.
It took a lot of years for me for it all to sink in. But,
yeah, it was awesome.
Let's get started in here on the first question that we get from everybody all the time. How do you manage the weeds? How do you deal with it? So let's just kick it off with that.
For me, it's all right. Back up a little bit. If you just want to go out and control weeds with just mechanical means, that's all you're going to do is mechanical means, I think you're going to run into trouble. For me, a lot of the nitrogen comes from cover crops, and so that's not really soluble. So I think a lot about how soluble my fertility is versus insoluble. and how to make that available with cultivators and tillage and stuff like that. So my real trick, so to speak, is to hide fertility in a cover crop until the time that I need it. Because like I said, if you just are just going to go out and put out 180 units with cattle manure or whatever, you're likely going to get beat if all you do is mechanical means. It's really understanding the biology, I suppose, is
Prevention.
short of it. Prevention is key.
We're mainly cultural and mechanical practices. On the cultural side of things, just a crop rotation, having a small grain in there to help suppress the weeds, using rye, and then obviously on the mechanical side, rotary hoes, tine weeders, flame weeders, row crop cultivators, and pulling it by hand. We try to keep that to a minimum.
My kids don't like me as much as they used to.
Yeah, hand weeding is something that we do a lot of, or we spend a lot of money on hand weeding each year. We use the same H2A program that JP uses, and we feel on our operation that it's just as important as cultivating and tine weeding and harrowing. It's just something that's really worked good for us, and something we hope to continue doing as a means of getting rid of the weeds, because it's important.
Yes, I mean, the soil truly is our #1 defense for trying to grow good yields and mitigate both disease and also weeds. So having soil imbalance is really important. Also just proactiveness and timeliness. It's so much easier to hit a weed when it's at that white root hair stage. Hardly any effort to get rid of it. You can use tools like a tine weeder or a rotary hoe and really, you're cruising through the field 10 miles an hour and you're making a lot of progress. If you see weeds, you're almost too late. If you can try to be on that front end of them, you're gonna make your life a lot easier down the road. And then really it's truly game on until crops are canopied. When they're canopied, you can, relax a little bit. You still need to manage your crops, but that starting point is right before planting all the way to canopy. You really gotta be timely and proactive.
We definitely try to keep on a very strict schedule. Whether it's every 3 or 4 days, don't go out to check it, just go do it.
Yeah. And then really use technology, know when the next rainstorm's coming, and then try to plan, get in there right before, because maybe you want to talk about your experience this summer.
You don't want to get behind. Yeah, it can. Yeah, rain.
Rain, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I even really want to talk about it. So, it can,
Sorry.
yeah, if you get behind, and we had fields where it was too wet to tine weed, it was too wet to harrow, and having a burner ended up saving the field, because the weeds, they were just as tall with the crop, and you can't go out there and cultivate when the weeds are as tall as the crop. It does you no good. So, another tool, a burner is just, add it to the tool chest, because you'll use it.
Yeah, I would agree on our farm. It's about having a diversity and multitude of tools. I think one interesting thing that we've talked about a lot is the difference and impact that crop rotation can have on some of that. Because we've seen it, because we transition through a lot of alfalfa, and so a lot of our corn crops coming right out of alfalfa, we're only hitting 3 times. A rotary hoe right after planting. One heavy cultivation pass, and then another weed burner pass later on. And that's done a pretty good job on a lot of that corn. But that corn that's coming back after a rotation of other crops, or if we've done a little bit of corn on corn, it's a lot more like 7 or 8 passes to really keep it under control. Is that what you guys have experienced?
I will say, and using I think Bryce alluded to it, and I spoke about it. Using the cover crop, if you have that residue in the top couple inches, that rotary hoe pass is almost 100% reset. It really is. If it's timely, like you said, at that white stage, you don't even have to destroy each one. All you have to do is open up, just so hot air can get to the root. And you cannot see them. You can't see them. And it's literally 100% reset. So some fields, 2 passes, some 2.
2 years ago on our beans, we had 4 passes with the rotary hoe and 4 with the row crop cultivator. We probably could have got by with a little bit less, but we were we went into this saying that we're not gonna tolerate weeds. We want good-looking fields.
I think, Jack, you had the same experience I did this year, though, that you got to have some thick skin and understand it's going to happen sometime, though.
Yeah, you're not gonna win them all. So
So another thing that we hear a lot, or a lot of questions about, is isn't all this extra tillage that you're doing, isn't that ruining the soil?
I hate that question. I really do. I think you said it as well, and I'm very proud of you this morning. I really was. I was like, man, that dude is really understanding. He really is. Tillage is a tool in a system, and something to keep in mind in organic. You can't raise the fertility that you need to grow corn crop without also adding a lot of carbon. A lot, whether it's manure, whether it's cover crops. So you're constantly adding carbon to this system. And just from my observation, I'm not a scientist, but just from my observation, the water infiltration, friability, structure, everything, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And I'm not a fanatic. I didn't wear Birkenstocks here today. It's just it just is what it is.
I think our soil's better since we've been doing this. Like you were saying earlier today, JP, that we're really not doing that many more passes with our rotation, that many more tillage passes. If we no-till our small grain into bean stubble, this last year we no-tilled our beans into standing rye, and then roller crimped the rye, and then the third year is corn, and really there isn't a whole lot of tillage, but maybe 3-4 passes.
Well, and also I think in that example, like these tillage passes that we're talking about with rotary hoeing and things like that, these are really minimally invasive.
It's not moldboard plowing.
Yeah, this is not moldboard plowing. We did that once, and I had on my list of questions, what's the biggest mistake you ever did? And I forget about it because I was really early on in the process, but I'm pretty sure that was overall the biggest mistake we've ever made.
Was that the first year?
Yeah.
And all these cover crops we're growing, I just feel like we're doing this soil so much more justice
Yeah,
than
I would
what
agree.
we were doing before.
I agree.
It's pretty cool.
yeah, and this conversation is kind of cool because JP says no moldboard plowing. We moldboard plow half our acres, so it just kind of attests to that how different every operation is, and just where you're at is no one's right and everyone does it differently. So.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. There's not one way, one plan to go about doing this. You have to be adaptable. My thoughts on soil health, I think, yes, tillage, we do more than the normal conventional farmer does, but I still think that we're positive 3 steps forward, maybe 1 step back for a net 2 in soil health improvement. On my farm, I'm actually trying to have a living root in the ground nearly all year. I'm actually in a 24-month rotation. I'm going white corn organic into organic winter wheat, into trying to pull off a double crop soybean in that same year, into a cover crop that's going to last me into the spring, and then back into white corn organic. So in that 24-month span, really I had something living minus the time where I was either incorporating the cover crop, incorporating my litter, or something like that. So I think that that's a positive move in the right direction as well, just trying to have something living in the soil.
If anyone would ask me publicly, or say you're destroying that soil, I have a farm that I would use for an example. It's where the river used to run, and we've got stand hills. It just deposited there, and if you till that and you're a commercial farmer, it'll blow. Well, we do have to till it organically, but we've increased the organic matter on that so much, it doesn't blow. Yeah. And the neighbors are like, wow, it'd be blowing if you didn't do that.
Well, and I can see it too on some of the ground that we have, that like all the rules of agronomy that we learned in college and stuff like don't work. Like we're growing crops that we didn't put nearly enough nitrogen on to grow that.
No.
It just doesn't compute. And I think that, like, how could that be if we're destroying the soil?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like It is. I don't think we know how this all works exactly. I think we have some ideas and stuff like that, but I can tell you that what we're doing is working and moving in the right direction.
Yep, agreed.
Eric, maybe you can comment. You've done some grazing.
Yep.
And I guess I forgot to ask about that during weed control, but also in fertility.
Sure.
What's been your experience with grazing?
Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly what it is, but coming out of grazing, like heavy cover crop, multi-species, the weed control is much easier. And I'm not trying to make it sound like magic or anything like that, but it is so much easier coming out of that, like peas, graze, back into corn. And the fertility needs, my first couple years, I was pretty scared. We have access to hog manure, turkey litter. We have multitude of manure sources. And I've been backing off slowly. And so the nitrogen use is like, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculously small. And so every year I get braver and braver and use less and less fertilizer, especially after grazing. That's a huge part of the farm. As much impact with cattle as possible. Managed impact, I should say.
Any other livestock experiences with you guys?
We don't do any grazing. We have a feedlot. We've got a good friend that's got an organic dairy in southeast Iowa. So he has pastures that he rotates, into row crops later on. And he tells us that that's where he gets his best crop, best weed control, best yield.
Yeah, and it's scary because there's the first year I did it, there's weeds in the cover crop. And you're like, oh man, we're in deep trouble. And the next year, it's a hoe pass and close cultivate, well timed, but without exaggeration, hoe pass and close cultivate. That's it. So.
Good deal. So what do you think overall, and if you think back to before you were doing some of this, might be a little harder for you, Jack.
Yep.
What's been the biggest change from being a conventional farmer to being an organic farmer?
You gotta have a really open mind. And you can't just go down to the co-op to get something.
Yeah, you got to adapt, I guess. Kind of the mind shift. You start looking at the same thing differently. Planting, when you're a conventional farmer, you plant the seed in the ground. You want to make sure that emergence is good in your final stand. You've saved that, because that's what your yield's going to be based off of, is your final stand. With organic farming, we're putting a few more seeds in the ground. Our emergence might be a little bit sluggish, so we might lose some plants on emergence. And then with some of the tillage that we talked about previously, we're taking out some of the plants also, maybe up to 10%. So, you're trying to think, hey, I want to protect 90% of my field, because if I don't perform some of these tillage passes very aggressively, I'm going to have the weeds take over. So you're really looking at things with a different lens.
Never farmed conventional.
Neither have I, so nothing for
But I
you.
think
I think I would echo a lot of that is that there's just a lot more planning, and there's a lot more I think we talk on our farm today and we say things that 10 years ago we would have been like, are you crazy? And
Yeah.
that's just sort of that's Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's like that happens all the time.
I did take over a farm that was conventional,
Okay.
2,200 acres, and it's better.
Yeah.
It's better now.
Yeah.
So it was chem no-till, which is the way to go these days. And the owners even they were scared about it coming in, but and honestly so was I, because I've worked with people through the years and seen it work. But when it's all on you, and you go out there and you're telling them that it's going to work, and then there's some doubt there. So to pull it off and to make the farm better and to have less erosion it was pretty awesome.
I've got a long list of questions, but I'm going to throw it out there to the crowd to ask some questions here, right here in front.
What about use of companion cropping, relay cropping?
Sorry, we weren't there quick enough with the mic for
No
the
problem.
recording, if you would. Yeah.
What is your use in organics with intercropping, relay cropping, and companion cropping, where the two crops are being for sold, not cover crops, but actual cash crops?
Personally, I'm a one crop at a time guy.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same
right,
here
so,
for cash crops,
I
but
mean,
for,
there's
yeah,
enough to do.
yeah.
Honestly, there's enough to do. I wish I could, find a Hagee and interseed some stuff. I really do, but I think someone said today in maybe the previous session, sell your boat. There's plenty to do.
Yeah. On a transition standpoint, I mean, I'm doing winter wheat, and then I'm gonna frost seed some crimson clover. It's not quite trying to harvest my crimson clover. It'll be for cover, but that's an example of just trying to have one thing started, another thing behind it growing, so then when I take my weed off, I will not have those weeds coming up in July, so.
So I think that the perspective that you're getting here is one that I think that this whole group probably feels a little bit, maybe you haven't phrased it this way, but we focus a lot on our way of thinking about playing defense as much as playing offense. Like, I'm not out there trying to grow the biggest corn yield that I can. I'm really working hard to make sure that I don't grow a crappy corn yield.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
the margins on what we're doing are high enough that it's important to just execute well, as opposed to shooting for the moon sometimes.
And I just went through transition, so I can't afford to play games.
Yeah, and that's where I think some of these things. Now we're experimenting with some of that stuff. We've played around with some of it. Some of it works better than others. We have talked with some guys that have had some success interseeding. So that's one of the things that we're going to be practicing this year, is combining some small grains and some peas to help. Because the peas in our area, we don't get enough shading. Just the climate's not quite right to really be consistently successful in some of those crops. So I think that's where we're going to be focused on trying some of those things. But I couldn't agree more with these guys. Just like the execution challenges on one crop is really hard. Trying to throw together more complicated systems can really be a challenge. So
We definitely would have the opportunity, like we put clover with our oats, and that clover, it gets big and beautiful by the end of the summer. And we got people ask us, why don't you mow it and bale it? Well, because we want to make sure our corn crop is a success the next year. Let's
Yep.
return all of that to the ground.
And that's a great point, is that we really try to think about the multi-year return, and we put just as much value on growing nitrogen as we do selling a crop. I mean, on our farm.
Yeah, no
So,
doubt. I take it back just a little bit. I'll underseed clover with grazing, so maybe there I get two crops.
So the new Farm Bill takes organic research and extension dollars from $20 million a year up to $50 million a year over the next 5 years. As farmers, what would you say the priorities are for land-grant universities when it comes to organic research, better understanding organic systems, and/or extension support?
Go ahead, JP.
That's a tough one
come
to
on, guys,
answer.
leave me hanging here.
I will just throw something in. I've learned an awful lot by digging through research. And the research that backs up what we're seeing on the farm, it's out there. It just doesn't have any money. You go watch football on Sunday and you see 6 Corvus commercials. You don't see anything on, what we're seeing. And there's really not a ton of products to sell in that, to raise the visibility of it. So I don't have good answers. I will say that the research is out there, at least a little bit.
I think that we've learned so much of what we're doing through networking. I think that if the extension could help extend that, like Practical Farmers of Iowa were members of that, and that's been a great network. If Iowa State could collaborate and make some, or extension in general, and just make some networking opportunities, there's so much to be learned through that.
I would say even from a supply chain, conventional farming space, the supply chain's really, really developed on our organic, and it's getting better over the years, but there's still a long way to go. Just connecting farmers with the right resources, I think there's somewhat of a vacuum, so the information flow if that could be improved, that'd be helpful. I agree with what you said. I think a lot of us have informal networks that have grown just because of the vacuum. We all compare notes, we're doing different things, and we usually get together once a year and kind of review what worked, what didn't, what can we do next year. So internally, we're doing a lot of R&D.
I think Eric kind of made a good point that there's not a lot of the research in agriculture today is product-based and product-funded. And so I think practice-focused research could be really helpful because there's nobody out there doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think that that's really important. And for me also, I think a lot more consideration needs to be done to scale organic farming. I think that there's a lot of folks that work on and push on practices that, just frankly aren't practical once you get above a couple hundred acres. And really focusing on understanding the execution risks around some of those. I give the example all the time that people are like, well, why don't you just roller crimp your rye and plant your soybeans into that? And I'm like, hey, that's good. I mean, I think you can do that. We planted like 800 acres last year of organic soybeans, and like if you have a failure of that roller crimping to where it doesn't work, like it gets really hard to rescue that stuff. I mean, you can't cultivate through that residue, you can't do all that kind of stuff. You're pretty much screwed. On 40 acres, you might be able to rogue your way out of that by cutting weeds and stuff. On 800 acres, that's just not realistic. So we're having to do a lot more experimentation of these practices to make them, to understand how we can do them consistently to do it on a reasonable amount of scale. So.
Yep. The networks, I mean, if you go to like a university, agronomy field day, honestly, and there might be exceptions, but academics are pretty crappy farmers. Pretty bad.
I would like to have the universities work with us to come out and help us and design and try stuff and help us make sure that we get this trial done right. I'd like to see some of that. I'd like to see that help.
I think we're on the same text list. There must be 14 or 15 different farmers, and I mean, there's some monster truck farmers in there that, live by experience, and that's really how it's getting done right now.
On your clover, when you're fall, you let that grow up all winter or all fall. Do you end up disking that down, or you try to just plant into it?
What we've been doing is we put our chicken litter on in the fall, and then we lightly disc that. It doesn't completely kill the clover. Actually, last year, I felt like it broke up the crown roots more, and the clover just flourished more. Then we don't do any real tillage to terminate that clover until the spring. Usually we have to field cultivate it twice.
Yeah, and us, I mean, we apply the chicken litter and we underseed all of our oats with clover alfalfa mix, a plow down, and we moldboard plow our alfalfa, our clover, our mix. And so that's, just another way of doing it. And with that, we feel burying the weed seed and just kind of cutting the roots, because we have enough ground where I'm at where it's not a erosion problem. But yeah, just burying the weed seed and kind of cutting the roots so we don't have volunteer alfalfa or clover in our corn next year is, just something, we don't want to fight anything else than what you have to.
We do mow our clover throughout the fall because you'll get some weeds that come up, and we want to try to get those knocked down before they go to seed. Just with a batwing mower.
Couple questions. How tall are corn and beans can you rotary hoe? And what happens if you get a hailstorm, say 1st of July, and it knocks out the canopy?
This is why we have these people here and not just me.
But my hoe pass, I like to hit it at spike, just as corn is emerging, and beans maybe just after hook. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
What are your options if you get a hailstorm, say the 1st of July, and knocks out the canopy for weed control?
You're screwed.
Yeah.
We could, again, we're not crop insurance agents, but we could talk about the benefits of organic crop insurance being very strong.
But as far as weeds go,
as far as weeds
you're
go,
dead in the water.
Yeah.
Well, my farm got hit pretty hard at blister stage August 6th of this year, at a great looking organic farm. real tall corn, beautiful. Got hit, total crop failure, got 100% of my hail coverage policy, but revenue didn't kick in because I still had too many bushels out there. So I managed it. I put on an organic fungicide, I put on organic copper, and I irrigated it. I was the only one doing anything with their crop, but you know, this is worth quite a bit of money, so I invested into it. At blister stage, I was told you probably cannot get the right test weight. You're going to be under, and I was trying to sell this for food grade quality. And I think that investment of that fungicide and that copper at the right time actually allowed for me to harvest, and it was 57-pound test. And I can't believe that it was like that, but that goes to show this investment in your soil. A lot of my dollars go right down into the soil, and that helps keep your plants a little bit more healthy and on the defense. In terms of rotary hoeing, I've actually interlaced a rotary hoe pass after I cultivated. I didn't think my cultivation threw enough dirt right at that plant root base, and that's where you're gonna have trouble with the weeds, is right in the row. Weeds in the middle of your row, you can get them really easily. Right when they're in between the row, you need to make sure you're still steroiding that, and if your cultivator's not throwing enough soil in between the row, I interlaced a rotary hoe pass. So that corn was probably 4 leaf tall. You're going to tear it up pretty good, but again, it's that, what are we trying to get at? We're trying to get at no weeds. If I have a few leaves that are clipped, then that's fine because I planted more so I can compensate. You might want to put like a flex ear on your corn too if you're growing organic, so if you do take out plants or you do have a hailstorm or something else, your ear can compensate. So just a couple different defense mechanisms that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. We plant a lot of flex here, and that's been really successful for us because all else equal, you're going to probably have a little bit lower germination. We don't have some of the same seed treatments. You just have some factors working against you that like we work to minimize, but you're just going to be a little bit off, I think, of what the potential is on a lot of cases, and that's just important to consider. So I was a big fan of the lower soybean population to grow more plants, and I lost that battle this year. So
I did as well.
Yeah. Conventional, I think
Live
it's
and
a
learn.
good technique,
It is.
but
It's not a good one in
organic
organic.
is, a
Yeah.
little bit tricky.
We usually rotary hoe 2 days after we plant corn, and then it spike, and then we start to deal with the weeds with the tine weeder after that. Seems to be a little bit more gentle on that corn plant. Beans, we've rotary hoed beans that are that tall before.
Oh, yeah.
We've done it after we cultivated.
Yeah.
Didn't hurt them.
Actually, it might help
Question
them.
out here.
You could hoe some big beans.
Yeah.
So my name is Sebastian Andrews. I'm from Quebec in Canada. So I'm organic farmers and agronomist. So I would like to share some experience. So I'm a guy that deeply fell in love with the problems of cover crop and no-till and organics. The first equipment I sold when I bought the farm, I run a farm, it's 35 organics. It's a mobile plow. I use ridge till. You can imagine how many cover crop I use. I would like, and I understand one thing. Now farming we're living on paradigm. The paradigm is empty war. Empty war is we need to plant, kill others. Herbicides, tillage. I understand we need to replace the weeds by other plants, good plants. Okay, because if the weeds is there because we vacuum them. And we need to, all this is my observation, we need to replace, the key is the flower. The flower species, the timing, the synchronization of the time, and the relationship with the soil. But it's really complicated to put the good flower. And we need dominant, your cash crop, subdominant, and relay for the next crop. So I pushed my system on the ridge till. I use sweet clover between, and really, and I have an idea. I share this with you because I'm just want to be not the only crazy. You want to try this, you know?
It's a general requirement to do organics that you're just a little bit crazy.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Next year I will push to do 60 inches corn with cover crop. And the idea is to put, because the issues of fertility, we only build the fertility before or after the crop. The idea is to, same population, 60 inches row, It's more easy to control population, weed control. You have more population. You only reduce 20% your yield because you have flex genetics on, and use cover crop, a mix of cover crops. And next year you will strip till on the cover crops. The idea is to make 2 years of corn in organics. So,
Yeah,
if you have other crazy guys, you try this. I will we'll make a group to try this.
No, this is like really reinforces the point that I had, because I've had the same conversation on our farm, and like if you go up to a conventional farmer and say that, they're going to say this is the craziest, dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I'm just like, there's something there that might actually work, you know. You guys talk about.
I was going to say, as soon as JP pulls it off, then I will. I'll let him take care of it.
And in fact, also,
I mean, I think what we've seen when we've talked about it is that there's a lot of things that make sense. For me, I just really struggle with getting past the canopy issues, and weed management is so hard. And I get it. We can go in and mow those interspaces in and stuff like that. I don't have good scalable equipment that can do that today. I've got to. It sounds good on doing it on 30 acres, but trying to pull that off on, you know, we'll have 4,000 acres of corn this year. I just don't know how we're going to do that. So that's kind of where we're still on some of those things, and doing this organic farming is we're going to maybe play around and experiment with that a little bit. But my biggest challenge right off the gate is I'm not sure how I make that scalable right away.
That's what I was going to ask. What scale is that? At what acreage or hectares?
you talk about my size of my I'm really small farm, 200 acres, but you know.
Yeah,
so,
and that's where, going back to the research question earlier, is that like on our scale, it's really hard to experiment with those kinds of things, not understanding or seeing a pathway towards how I'm going to implement that on my whole farm. There was a little bit more crazy talk to do like really off the wall things earlier, but the last couple of years we've kind of really focused in a little bit more on making sure that it's really executable. Because there's some techniques that we've used that really work, but they took up so much time, attention, and focus that they just ended up being a train wreck for management of the rest of the farm. So I don't know, what's your guys' experience with sort of off-the-wall ideas or things like that?
Well, we're young enough in it that the actual idea of going organic was off the wall. So we haven't had any other off-the-wall ideas yet.
Yeah, and I guess for our operation, since we've been doing it as long, I mean, we love hearing stuff like that, and what, like JP and them guys, they're trying all sorts of things, but we've found what works for us, and it's working really good, and it's hard to get away from what's working really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's great hearing that and trying new things, but yeah, it's when stuff's working, it's consistently been working for this long. It's kind of is what we'll do.
Yeah, I think it goes back to like that idea of playing defense. Like I don't need to try to make it. I'd just as soon successfully grow a good solid crop as opposed to really putting a ton of effort into trying to get to that extreme next level with a really radical approach that increases my risk dramatically. I think we're looking at more incrementally making positive improvements with a little bit of craziness on the side just to try some new ideas and things like that, but it's a balance.
Yeah, like this year we tried 20-inch rows and we got what we needed out of it. We're not doing it. So it's just little things, but we didn't put everything to 20-inch rows. It's just little changes and playing defense. See,
and this is where some of your intuition and your thoughts like work against you, and that's what I've learned, is that like I was all on like, man, we were gonna go and do 15-inch row soybeans with a spacer row to drive the cultivator down. And then somebody on our team was thinking about it one night and said, you know what happens when, where's the worst weed problems you have?
Exactly.
It's in the row. Not in between the row. Controlling the weeds in between the rows is fairly straightforward. And so by going to 15-inch rows, you're doubling the amount of rows and doubling the amount of places that you have problems with weeds. And so like the initial intuition was like, this is the smartest thing ever. And then we kind of realized that this actually might be the dumbest thing ever.
And corn on corn is not, it's not that hard, organic. I mean, I personally love corn on corn organic. So,
And I will just let you know one thing. In Quebec, we are really innovating, and we develop a lot of weed control system. We are with the language, we speak French. So with France and Europe, so we have a lot of expertise in weed control. We use double Rotario, triple, so many stuff. Maybe if you need to have a new innovating, in Quebec, maybe we can help to have a lot of research there.
Yeah, we definitely are all open to new ideas and sharing them, so we appreciate that.
So, with the exception of Eric, all of you were conventional farmers at one point.
My whole life I've
You
been,
never-
but yeah.
I'm on my
Your family was conventional at one
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
in 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm on my second year organic, but going to bed at night, especially during the transition years, how much did you fear a market saturation, even before you could get a crop to market? And then do you fear a market saturation or foresee it 20, 30 years? And then to that, my mindset has shifted so much becoming an organic farmer. Could the margins get narrow enough that you could see yourself going back to conventional? Because from what I've learned and what I've seen, what I can do, I personally don't think that way.
I didn't have any sleepless nights during transition. I felt like the market was gonna be there.
Yeah.
We did our research beforehand and really felt like there was still gonna be strong demand, and I think there will be for several years to come. My kids might have to worry about it.
Well, the most interesting thing, as conventional farmers, we're net exporters in this country. We're net importers of organics right now. Out of all the things that the United States imports, number 2 is soybeans for organic
organic,
products.
yeah,
Yep, for
yeah.
organic products. Number 2 is soybeans, and number 5 is corn. Out of everything that we import organically. So that, to me, really resonated with me. We need to offset these imports. We have challenges with, just making ends meet on the conventional end, yet here are these countries, and there was a presentation where JP actually showed which countries we're importing from. It's China, it's India, it's Argentina. These are the countries that are getting the $8 corn, $9 corn, $10 corn, while we're selling ours for $3.50. So that's what gave me peace of mind, that I kind of want to internalize this as much as I can. And what's interesting is our grains are getting put through protein sources as well. The demand for organic proteins is just skyrocketing. So there's, we're not just selling it in one avenue. Food grade corn is going maybe one way, feed grade corn is going another. So to me, there's a lot of market opportunity, and we kind of need to just listen to what consumers want us farmers to produce.
I don't really worry about what's going to happen in 20 years because I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. I know pretty confidently that this market's going to be here in 5 years. The other thing, though, is that what organic farming has done for us is that it's really taught us how to think differently, adapt, build new systems. There'll be something next after organics, and we're going to be ready for it, and we're going to go in and tackle that. So I sleep well at night with our thoughts on organics. So.
Yeah, and kind of the same thing. I mean, we worry about our break evens in conventional, and I worry about it just the same in organic. Like, I want to make money at $5 organic. It's a goal of mine. So, I mean, I want to be the least cost organic grower. I want to be the last guy standing.
Time for one more question in the back there.
So I've heard you guys talk about cover crops quite a bit, but my question is, do you guys have or experimented with success with, either chem fallowing with a broad spec herbicide like Axe, or breaking out the chainsaw and going finding the rod weeder and conventional fallowing to deal with weed pressure?
I'm not familiar.
Me neither.
Me neither.
No, I don't think you could use Axe in the field. I don't think you could use Axe herbicide in a field.
Well,
It is organic, but I don't think it's labeled.
There's a misperception around, there are a couple of organic burn down products, but they're not labeled for broad spectrum burn down in the field. They're only labeled for weed control, like around grain bins and things like that. So that's a general first principle of organics. Matt Dillon here corrected me earlier when I said that the NOP is pretty vague about a lot of things. There are some things that are quite specific, you know, and those chemicals and how they're approved for use. There's one thing is that, you know, basically chemical based, you know, even if it's an organic or a naturally derived chemical as a sole control for burn down is just not permitted. So that's that's the last question. We're happy to follow up. AgriSecure team will be at the trade show. These guys will be around here to answer some questions. Thanks for all your time and thanks for attending.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
And thank you, panel.